Welcome everyone to the launch of Life Without Barriers Child Protection Week program of events. I'm Jane French, the Executive Director of Child, Youth and Family Services at Life Without Barriers, and I'll be facilitating this session, which is all around putting children first. I'd like to start by inviting our Life Without Barriers Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander state leads to do an acknowledgement of country on behalf of all of us. So I will hand over to the team, Leonie, Mel, Pam, Damien and Carly.
Hi and welcome. Debbie Edem, so good morning, and I've just spoken my Eastern Island language from where my father is a descendant, or where I'm a descendant. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I connect in from today, the Turrbal Yagara people, acknowledging our elders past, present, our emerging leaders of tomorrow as we walk in their footsteps, celebrating Child Protection Week from across the country. Big Eso, thank you, and I'd like to now hand over to Mel.
Mel, I'll just ask you to go off mute if you can.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Leonie. Yes, I'd like to welcome you all. I'd like to do an acknowledgement of the traditional owners whose land that we are meeting on today, the land of the Gama people. I'd like to pay my respects and our respects to the elders past, present and the future. I'm a Nuggen man from way down south of Adelaide, and so I'm part of an Aboriginal nation. But lastly, I'd just like to remind you all that this was and always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you.
Thanks, Mel. Kaya Wanju, hello and welcome to Child Protection Week. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the budget that I live and work on, the Noongar Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from the lands that you are all meeting on today. I pay my respects to our elders past and present and to our emerging leaders. Today I reflect on our children who are grossly overrepresented in the out-of-home care system. In WA, the number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children in care is 58% and continues to rise. I look forward to reducing this number, and if our children are to be in care, that they maintain their connection to their family and country to ensure their culture and identity. This is one of the many challenges for us all who work in LWB. So let's just do it together. Over to you, Damien.
Yeah. Thanks, Pam. So I'm connecting in from Darwin, Northern Territory, up here in Larrakia country, and pay my respects to their elders, both past and present, as well as emerging leaders who may be on the particular Zoom line today. So I'm a Kugach and Kukiyalanji man from Normanton and up in the Tablelands of Queensland, and extend that appreciation to my cultural heritage as well.
Thanks, Damien. I'm Carly, Darug woman, and I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands across Victoria and Tasmania, and also across the country where you meet today. I pay my respects to our elders past and present, as well as our emerging leaders. I want to acknowledge the traditional lands of the Yugambeh language group where I sit today, and extend my appreciation to the cultural heritage, beliefs and spiritual connection with this land. Thank you.
Thanks, Carly, and thank you, team. It's been great to have you open this session in that way for us. And I guess in particular, my reflections have been, as we've headed into Child Protection Week, just about the ongoing impacts of the stolen generation and how the work that you do with us is so vital in helping us to right some of those wrongs. So thank you. I now ask you, state leads, to turn your cameras off and become participants rather than presenters. Thank you. So, as I mentioned at the top of the session, this session now is all about a conversation with key people from Life Without Barriers about what putting children first means to them. And through the conversations, we'll hear a range of perspectives that will hopefully help us to continue to do exactly that, to put children first. So just a few housekeeping bits and pieces. This is a bit of a first for Life Without Barriers, running a whole Child Protection Week program virtually. So bear with us. I'm in Melbourne, and there'll be others on the line who are in Melbourne, which means I'm deep in lockdown with children, homeschooling, and surrounded by pets that won't leave my sight anymore after me being home for so long with them. So things may happen that we can't control. So just bear with us. For those of you listening in, feel free to submit questions as you go using the Q&A button that should be on your screen. And if time permits, I'll put these to our panelists. If you drop out during the session, just access the link in your email again, and you should be able to drop straight back in. The session today is being recorded just because there were lots of people that wanted to tune in that couldn't make this time. So we will record it so that we can share this more widely later on. Just before I introduce the panelists today, we've got a couple of really important messages from some people that have recorded their message via video. So I'd like to share two of those with you first. The first one is from Claire Robbs, our Chief Executive. So I'll ask that the support team play that video now. Thank you.
Every day, Life Without Barriers offers support and care to children. We want each and every one of those children to feel as safe and respected as they should. To achieve this, we must all recognise the responsibility we all have as individuals to make sure their safety comes first, they're well cared for, and above all else, protected from abuse. This week is Child Protection Week, celebrating 30 years, with the theme, Putting Children First. The week-long campaign aims to keep children safe by placing child safety and well-being high on our national agenda. Now, whilst COVID prevents us physically from coming together, technology is a wonderful thing that allows us virtually to join this great session you're about to be part of. I'm confident the variety of sessions available throughout this week will help us all learn and strengthen our knowledge about ways we keep children safe by putting them and their needs first, always. So thank you for your dedication to children all across Australia, and I really hope you enjoy this session.
Thank you. I would now ask that the second video be played. The second message we have is from some of our young people. So as we all know, the work of the Royal Commission into institutional responses to child sexual abuse really highlighted the importance of asking children what they think and hearing children's voices. And it's something we want to have a really clear focus on, sharp focus on as we go forward. But this second message represents the views of some young people that Life Without Barriers supports. And they were asked to document their thoughts about what putting children first means from their perspective. So I'll ask the team to play that video now. Thank you.
A caseworker found our biological dad and no one else made the effort to do that. We asked and it never happened.
Yeah, like it was a constant asking, and he was the first caseworker who put any effort into it, and it was really appreciated, and it made us feel like people were listening to us, which is obviously a good feeling to have.
And I think that made us feel supported, and they could improve on this if the other casework, like we could have found our dad way earlier if we were just listened to, and they actually made the effort to do it rather than put it aside for somebody else to do.
So I think all caseworkers should probably do stuff like that just because it's the right thing to do.
A time I felt supported was when I had moved my place from Shorncliffe to Caboolture. Monique was very supportive in the way she spoke to me and having everything done right then and there, as it was an emergency crisis for me at that point in time.
I felt supported when the Life Without Barriers support worker took me to CPW to get me some clothes.
A time that LWB made me feel really supported was when I had to move regions really quickly with not a lot of preparation at all. I wasn't able to bring any of my personal belongings with me. And Life Without Barriers really ensured that I had a lot of support around me in the new region that I was in. And they were constantly checking up and making sure that I was agreeing with everything that was happening and that I understood what was going on. And that was really great.
When Dad passed away and they said that if I needed to talk to someone, there's always someone to talk to.
Having the youth workers go through a counselling qualification, because it would help with the various different clients you get.
If I could change one thing about the care system, it would be the way that transition plans are done. I feel that often they're done so that they look good on paper rather than real life support for a young person, and this can really make a huge difference once the young person turns 18.
Personally, I think I'd change the fact that carers aren't always looked into as thoroughly as they should be. Like, had seen some people who've had really bad carers, haven't always had the best carers ourselves, so I think that's a big one. Like, you know, it just traumatises kids further than they already are, so it's not really a fair
it's
thing to
scary
do.
coming into a new home and them being weird.
Advice for a new worker would be to write all emails and case notes about a young person as if they were sitting next to you and reading them over your shoulder, because one day we will be reading them.
So don't talk at the child, talk to the child, get to know the person, child. Yeah.
Another one.
And try to form a relationship. Don't just make it about the paperwork and the forms you have to fill in. No child wants to sit there and answer all these questions and then you know nothing about them.
Yeah, don't come and tick boxes. We don't respect you when you do that. We don't really care, and we're gonna make your life a living hell. That's a promise. I can tell you it will happen.
Piece of advice to the caseworker: don't let us slip away. Don't let us have that time and space, because that's when we're most vulnerable and we do need support.
Speak up about your problems, don't be ashamed to hide it.
Probably that it's not your fault. Like,
You're not the reason.
You're not the reason you're in care. You had nothing to do with it, no matter what anyone has told you. It's not your fault. You didn't deserve it. So, just remember that.
We will get there. It does take time. It doesn't happen right then and there, but you'll get there.
That there are more good people out there than bad, and these people that are working in this sector really genuinely are there because they want to make a difference and they want to help. And often I know that it can be really hard to trust all of these new people that are constantly coming in and out of your life, but it will be worth it in the end.
I just want to make sure that kids know that it's their life and that they have control of it, and that they should do what they want to do, not what others want them to do, and be who they want to be and not who people want them to be, because it's their life and it's up to them in the end. And I think also caseworkers need to understand that it's the kid's life, so if they say they don't want to do something, they're not going to do it. They shouldn't have to just because you want them to. Like, you need to listen to the kid.
Indeed.
Thank you for that, and thank you to the team who put that together, to the caseworkers who obviously went out and worked with the young people to record that. Just some gold in there, and pretty simple stuff for us to take on board. Some of the things that those kids asked for was that we put the effort in, that we don't let them slip away, and that we ask them what's important. So that was just great stuff. Thank you, everyone. I would now like to ask the panelists to come on board and turn their cameras on, and I will start some introductions. So welcome, panelists. We have together with us today Jillian Calvert, who is a Life Without Barrier board member. Jill has been an advocate for children and young people for over 30 years. She was the inaugural New South Wales Children's Commissioner from 1999 to 2009 and established it as one of Australia's leading children's policy and research centres, one which was built on being child-centred and child-inclusive. Prior to that, Jill was responsible for coordinating government action for children and, importantly, refocusing government's attention on the importance of the early years. She was also instrumental in breaking the silence around child sexual assault, where her leadership as the New South Wales Child Protection Council established New South Wales' collaborative and comprehensive approach to tackling child abuse and neglect. Jill started her career as a family therapist with troubled children and their families, and the importance of listening to children and families' experience has underpinned her lifelong commitment to children and their well-being. Thank you for joining us today, Jill.
Thanks.
Vincent Nuggen is a proud Aboriginal Quandamooka man, and he has worked in the past as a youth worker in out-of-home care, in short-term and long-term residential care. He's worked in an identified role as an Indigenous youth worker in Townsville within an out-of-home care therapeutic residential service, has been a next step aftercare support worker and coordinator with Life Without Barriers in Queensland, and he's currently an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultural support planner in our Ipswich office. Welcome, Vince. Felicity Kime. Felicity is the President of Family Inclusion Strategies in the Hunter, Inc., which is also known as FISH. At the age of 17, Felicity had her first child and soon became the mother of 3 children who were all removed from her care in 2011. 2 of Felicity's children were returned to her care in 2015 and 2016. One of her children remains in the care system, and she has a 4th child who's always been in her care. Felicity has also had her own care experience. She's now a parent advocate and leader who has for some years been using her lived experience of the care system and of child removal to teach others and to influence change in the child protection system. As well as being the first parent president of a parent-led organisation in Australia, Felicity is also a parent partner in the Parent Peer Support Project based in Newcastle. She's currently studying for her Diploma of Community Services. It's great to have you with us today, Felicity, to share your wisdom. Jacinta Bachelor. Jacinta has been a foster carer since 2009, and with her husband, Eddie, they've been long-term carers of a sibling group of 4 who first came to them as an emergency placement some time ago. They also have an adult son, and Jacinta is passionate about supporting young people to stay in care until 21, although if she was in charge, she would make that the age of 25. Jacinta enjoys seeing her family achieve and being proud of themselves, and is equally happy if they just have a go. Thank you for joining us today, Jacinta. And last but not least, Rob Ryan. Rob is the Executive Lead of Child, Youth and Family Engagement at Life Without Barriers. He has a broad history working in the non-government, government and charity sector for over 28 years. Prior to commencing with us, he was the CEO for Key Assets. And earlier in his career, Rob worked with the Queensland State Government in director and regional director roles in the practice, training and out-of-home care spaces. Rob's also the chair of the Forward Foundation Board of Advice in Queensland that supports forgotten Australians, and he has a long-standing role in support of NAPCAN, which is the National Association for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. Rob's also a Churchill Fellow and travelled as part of this fellowship on the topic of child protection. We'll hear a bit more about that later. And he's seen firsthand the different approaches to putting children first across the world can achieve. So welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being with us today. Let's get into the conversation. So, Jill, I might go to you first. Being on the board, you would know this very well, that Life Without Barriers is really public in our stance around putting children first, particularly when it comes to their safety and well-being. Can you talk to why is that such an important focus for us?
Well, it's an important focus for us because it matters to children. And for me, that's the best reason. Now, there are a whole lot of other reasons, but really the best reason why it matters is why it's important is that it matters to children. It matters to children to feel listened to feel valued and to feel respected. It's also one of the reasons Life Without Barriers exists. We are set up, as Claire was saying, to care for vulnerable children. And so that's our purpose. Therefore, we really need to put children first. Otherwise, we're letting the children down, we're letting ourselves down, we're letting each other down, and we're not achieving what the purpose of the organisation is or what our values are. I think it's especially important when you're looking at care and safety issues to put children first, because there are a lot of competing narratives around care and safety issues. And I think we saw this with the Royal Commission, where in a sense children were up against one of the most powerful institutions in the world, which is the Catholic Church. And we saw the consequences of not putting children first, of not listening to children. If in fact people had listened to children, we probably wouldn't have needed a Royal Commission, because the abuse would have been interrupted and the institutional nature that supported that and enabled that abuse would have been dismantled, hopefully, although I guess we're going to see in the future whether that's the case. I think, though, that with Life Without Barriers, we're not up against the most powerful institutions in the world. We're in fact working with and standing alongside of quite vulnerable and disadvantaged families. And so the challenge for us is, how do we have a pathway that puts children first, but also respects and acknowledges the disadvantage and vulnerability of the family and community that sit around that child? And how do we work with that disadvantage and vulnerability while still keeping always the end goal, which is making things better for children and helping children stay safe? And I think FISH is a great example of the work that we're doing with that. And it's great to see Felicity here and participating. So I guess for me, putting children first is really important because it keeps them safe. It also helps us help them to build better lives, which is of course why we're all here. And it also is a practical demonstration of putting Life Without Barriers' purpose and values into practice.
That's great, thank you. I couldn't agree more. Children's voices, we need them raised to the roof. LWB is also very committed to evidence-informed ways of working, Jill. So how does adopting this evidence-informed approach to our work help us to put children first?
My experience of working in various levels, both with families, having the privilege of working alongside families, alongside communities, and right up to working with at a state level where you're working with state governments, and also at a national level, is that there are competing cultural practices that exist all the time. So you've got the view that, we don't want to disrupt things, therefore we need to keep this problem out of sight. And that's really what breaking the silence was. And that still exists. People don't, certainly for families, it's a very confronting thing to face. But it's also confronting in sporting institutions and within Life Without Barriers itself. All of us feel like, this is really going to be uncomfortable and difficult. So there's that out of sight narrative or practice, if you like. There's also the anxiety about we've got to maintain our funding. We've got to maintain our contracts, because otherwise the organisation doesn't exist and we can't therefore help people. So there's always funding imperatives and regulatory requirements and so on that are another part of the narrative and the environment in which we all work. And I think there's another one, which is don't embarrass the powers that be, whether that's whether it's Claire, whether it's me on the board, or whether it's the police, or whether it's government. There's still that sort of thing about you don't want to sort of embarrass people. Evidence enables us to stick with what we know works in the face of those sort of competing cultural practices. They're very powerful, those other cultural practices. And so we need to have something that puts a stick in the ground that we can hang on to, that means that we don't get distracted by these competing cultural practices. So I think for that reason, it's really helpful to have evidence-informed practice and programs that keep you connected to what is important, which is outcomes for the children. I think evidence-informed practice also helps us put children first, in that we can look to the evidence about what is it that we mean when we say put children first, and what is a really good way to do that, and how do we do that. So again, evidence is that stake in the ground that enables us to check that what we're doing works, checks that what we're doing isn't harmful, and checks that, in fact, what we're doing has a lasting positive impact on the children and the families, which of course, again, is the reason that we exist. So for me, evidence-informed practice and evidence-informed programs and strategies really help me stay true to my purpose and my values.
Thank you, Jill. I'm going to go to Rob next. Rob, I mentioned in the intro that you did a Churchill Fellowship looking at child protection practice overseas. How does Australia compare to the rest of the world in terms of putting children first in our approaches to their safety and wellbeing?
Thanks, Jane, and good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. And I feel a bit privileged to be with such an amazing panel. There's some great practice wisdom here that will exceed my expertise life without barriers, but hopefully I can offer a few little insights. Probably the biggest thing to say is that across the world there's a lot more similarities than differences. So we often think that everyone else has the solution, and there's a lot of commentary about who's solved it and who's made the decision that has actually changed children's lives for the better. But actually, the reality is we're all grappling with very similar challenges and issues. Some people have got parts of it right. I don't think anyone has got it all right. And probably if clumping it all together, the biggest single thing that makes a difference in terms of success is a humanistic aspect to how we work with children and young people. So you can create systems change, but individuals will often be the person that makes the biggest difference to a child or young person's life and trajectory. Sometimes that can be a parent or a caregiver. Sometimes it can be a caseworker. Sometimes it can be a school teacher. We don't really know who that person will be, but often I guess the key message for everybody is that we all have a caring role. Regardless of the position you play, we are all collectively carers for children and young people. So probably the three international themes I would say that come out of this space that are quite critical would be that what children and young people, where we haven't got it exactly right, and what children and young people collectively say is that they just want to be informed. They want to be able to be part of the decision making. They want to have a strong support network and be able to connect with people around that network, both in community and family, and then also give them practical life skills. So it's not rocket science what we need to do to ensure that we put children first, but that is the key theme. And there was some interesting research recently from the World Health Organization and UNICEF at the Lancet report, and they've done a study on children flourishing. And that reinforces these messages that the key is that children have to be at the centre of what we do. And we also need to create participatory leadership from children all the way through. Children, families, caregivers, everybody needs to be part of the leadership process. And I suppose to really summarise this question and answer it, particularly with the child focus, I like a quote which is, "Don't ask me what's the matter with me, ask me what matters to me." If we focused on that, I think that would be a really good way forward.
That's great. And have you got anything you can share with us around some of the models and approaches you've seen overseas to doing exactly this? And it was a privilege to do a Churchill Fellowship, and I know that some of the people in the agency have done the Churchill Fellowship. By way of a plug, I'd strongly encourage lots of people to look into it. As an agency, we should really support our carers, our staff, and young people looking at opportunities like that, because it is a great chance to see how other people across the world do things, and we can learn from that. But I looked at just a couple of ones that I thought might be of interest. I think that the Netherlands and some of the Scandinavian countries have really nailed the
18 care leaver space that they're moving between 23, 25, and there's even sort of discussions about 30. We should be supporting children and young people well and truly beyond the turning 18. And we're doing some of that in Australia. We're not doing too bad, but we can do a lot better to ensure that there's a trajectory there. You know, as we all know, you don't finish at 18 and then suddenly have all the skills and things you need to be able to transition into adulthood. Another big one is that places like France provide financial support, and that financial support includes all the things that you might have you may need to help you set up your first home. Bit of money to help you get some beds, to get a microwave, to do all that sort of basic life stuff that is really critical. And I know that in Life Without Barriers, there's thinking about how we could do more of that to support the children and young people we care for. But as a country, we have a responsibility there. The UK and Australia's got a couple of examples of this as well, is a real focus on sibling care. And they've got these wonderful sibling camps in some countries, which they bring siblings together. I particularly liked some of the sort of stories in these sibling camps where children who weren't placed together would then do a pillow, and on the pillow would be a photo of each of their siblings, so that when they got the pillowcase, so that when they returned home, they'd have their sibling would be close to them when they were in a different placement. So little simple things like that can make a big difference. And another one that I thought was quite good was like a personal advisor. So there was a service called Platform 89 where they provided consultancy services to non-government agencies in the department, and then created a personal advisor so that the child or young person had someone who coached and walked with them, and they could pick up the phone at any time of the day and say, I just need a bit of a helping hand to give me a bit of a leg up. So they're probably 5 areas, but there's a range of services across the world that we could learn from and build into our local capability.
I just love all of that, and I want to do it all tomorrow. It sounds, thinking about children and young people as we think of our own, what do they need when they embark as adults? It's great stuff. Have you, Rob, just one follow-up one to you. Have you seen innovative ways to increase children's voices and their participation?
I think nothing that stands out. So nothing that sort of says, this is the, somebody's nailed it. The one that I love the best is having children on panels. So when you're interviewing for your positions, from the CEO all the way up, have a young person on a panel, or even have an independent panel of children and young people and a separate panel. And that they will create some really interesting insights. And I've actually been part of a panel process where there was a panel and a children's panel, and the children's panel got the exact same result as the other panel. And they had but a very different angle as to why they got there and how they got there. So that participatory leadership, I think, is really important. And, probably I think, in a context of what we do, if I had a metric that was going to be the metric I'd want people to build into their day-to-day job, I'd say, how are you individually impacting on the life of a child or young person? Have you listened to a child this week? Have you gone and sat with somebody? Have you had some time spending spending a bit of listening time? That whole adage, we've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. So do more listening, twice as much listening as you do speaking.
Thanks, Rob. And I might circle back around the panel after we've heard from everyone, just around that, how do we hear the voices of children more? But Vince, I might throw to you now. Cultural safety recognises the need for environments and care that are spiritually, socially, emotionally and physically safe for our young people. What are some of the things that we should be thinking about and doing when we are working to put children first, Aboriginal children first, in a culturally safe way?
Okay, so Yarrabungies means hello friend in Wandamuku. Thank you for the invite to be part of the Child Protection Week. Firstly, for me, the importance for we put children first culturally is to make sure that there's, that they have a home, safe, that when we do the pre-planning in LWB, that some of the decisions, if possible, are family-led, and that also the child is in, or what we would say Jarjum, is involved and participates, because obviously their voice is very important, especially culturally. And that we should also maintain, when doing the pre-planning, that we have that relationship with cultural practice advisors. So with part of my role within my region is I make sure that we establish a relationship with cultural practice advisors, because they are the link also to the family of the young person that's in the care. You know, that may be involvement with family contact, family-led decisions such as culture, education and health, but also making sure that their voice is being heard if they're in a non-Indigenous and an Indigenous care. So with LWB, you know, I, in my role, make sure that there's cultural capabilities within our region, you know, such with cultural immersions for the young people and the jargons in care, so that the carers also have an understanding that there are organisations out there that they can link in with the young person. Because I found that with young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island children in care, we have a mental health plan that's set up for them, okay? So, and sometimes it's, you know, it's good not to disturb that, but also to let options know that there are health organisations, Indigenous clinicians out there that can understand young children, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island children in care, because there's also that aspect culturally that there are men's and boys and women's business that might be going on besides what's happening to them with the diagnosis that they might have in their mental health plan. So part of that role is making sure that as a cultural support planner, we're referring to our RAP overview, making sure that there's cultural awareness training for our carers and staff, but also making sure that the carers and the children have access to the cultural support planner in their region, because that's where they're as an advocate and a voice for them to pass on their needs and understanding concerning their well-being and whatever issues that they have, especially around family. And then from family, depending on the age with the young person, there's that cultural connection, that yearning that they want, questions to ask, identity, who they are and where they stand in society today. So I think LWB have a really good, I suppose, understanding at this point for our young ones, our young Indigenous children in care. I've observed and experienced cultural camps where LWB definitely have that on the forefront. Cultural community events, making sure that, you know, the carers are aware that they're important dates culturally out there, but also resources for the young people, you know, children books, education about dream time, history, but not going into the history about our culture yet, depending on the age appropriate information that we pass on. Making sure the environment, you know, we talk about in the question, it talks about making sure, recognize the needs of the environment, you know, and in an environment that also answers emotionally safe. So you can create what the word is indigenizing the setting without tokenistic views of it or visual effects of it, you know, with a carer to have an understanding of what Aboriginal culture is in the sense of identifying, because the two main, I suppose, identifying objects with our culture is our flags. You have the Torres Strait Island and the Aboriginal flag. Now, I've had experience where I've had to educate certain carers the meanings, you know, just having that knowledge of understanding what painting and artwork means to our culture and to young people, but also educating that we have a spiritual connection also that we maintain is with our land, and through that land of spiritual is a connection that you will find with different young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders children in care that, you know, some of the carers ask, well, they love swimming a lot, you know, they love going, we like to take them out, you know, and in our culture there is the land and the sea, what we call Murrays or Kooris. You know, myself, I'm a saltwater Murray, which is North Strait Island, Guanamuku, and I have a connection to the ocean. And so does my daughter, so just for an example. But I also have young Aboriginal and Torres Strait clients, carers come up and say, you know, Vinny, I always see them out there and they're walking around picking up stones and, you know, the sand, you know, that's their connection to land. So part of my role is making sure that I provide an opportunity where they connect, made through a controlled organisation, such, for an example, as Dreamtime Didgeridoo Festivals. So they engage with cultural painting, storytelling, history, family, the importance of family, the importance of extended family, and the meaning in extended family. And in extended family, it's different meanings through the Aboriginal society and the white society. You know, and part of our role as a cultural support planner in LRW is making sure that we provide that information and education and awareness to carers and staff. So the staff therefore are educated culturally. If there is not a capability where I can advocate to come and talk to the carers, at least the staff have the awareness and the education and are always updated. But also part of our role to making sure that we put children first is to make sure that we are always up to date with legislation and policy. And part of my role is making sure that I'm in touch with QATSI, an organised Queensland Aboriginal and Torres Strait Childcare Peak here, the SNAKE, the Secretariat, I think I said it right, National Aboriginal Child Protection. So part of our education as a cultural support plan is also make sure that is provided to the staff, the carers, importantly, letting the young people know in care what we're doing for them, making sure that they have a voice in how we're doing it for them culturally in the reconnection. So it lays a platform for a strong identity in care, that they don't lose that, because the majority of our young people lose that identity in care. And part of our role, I believe, is a link between, you know, LWB, our culture, and the children in care. You know, there are significant, important cultural dates during the year that have aligned actually this year, which is funny enough. We recently had on August 4th the National Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island Children's Day, and their theme was Hear Our Voices. And then I found out this year that it was We Put Children's First. So for that to tie in, not only nationally and also with our culture, is really important, because, you know, we're doing the work for our young people in care. We're making sure their voices are being heard, but also that the government and the policies that are happening in the legislations are still maintaining that we, you know, children first may be non-Indigenous or Indigenous. But remember, I'm just talking through a cultural perspective and my cultural lens. I believe I can do it. I've been an Aboriginal for 40 odd years. So yeah, I think it's really important. You know, we've got to make sure, and the very important, I'll repeat it again, is pre-planning and identification, to make sure we take into account the culture needs, not only with the young person, but also with the community and the family. And we make sure it's really strength-based.
Thanks, Vince. That's really helpful. And if we've got time, I might circle back and ask us some follow-up questions around the voice, how we hear the voices of our Aboriginal children and young people. But in the interest of time, I'll keep moving and throw to Felicity next. Felicity, we know that parents love and care for their children deeply, but sometimes children will spend time in the care system. So you've got experience of that system. What are some of the important things that people caring for children should know?
Yeah, thanks again for the invite to be a part of this. And you know, it's always amazing when we can get young people and parents involved and their voices heard. You know, I guess from me talking, you know, my mum just turned 60 years old and she was in the care system from 2 weeks old, you know, and I was made a state ward in my younger years, you know. So, you know, I speak from generations of this stuff, and my children went to care, you know, and I guess one of the most important things when someone's caring for my child or someone else's child is that they remember who we are, that we love our children no matter what has happened, you know, and we're still that parent. You know, I can still be my children's mother when they're not in my care, and I can still play that role, you know. And I guess, you know, speaking, you know, around my story, you know, when my children went to care, you know, I could play so many important roles, but I was never given the opportunity. I was never asked if my kids had any medical issues. Was my kids allergic to anything? So these people taking my children and putting them into care just guessed, they don't have an allergy, they don't this, there was no question, so, I guess, it was being spoken about already today, that connection to family, that's one of the most important things, connection to family. And for me, a big one is the sibling connection. My children were all taken together, and they spent a bit of time together where at night time they would be scared and one of the little girls would lay in bed with the sister, and they'll comfort each other during the night, and that stuff wasn't allowed, and they got separated, so they were on their own, frightened, afraid, didn't know what's going on, and they didn't trust the system. These were strangers removing them, they don't trust them, and all they wanted to know from me, would they be okay? And there was not really any space given for that stuff for me to be able to calm my children, let them know that they're okay and they're safe, and then the siblings, connecting together. I have a son in long-term care, and this topic's about putting children first, and and I put my son first every day, by leaving him in a placement where he's happy, he's emotionally supported, and he loves that placement. As a mother, emotionally that is hard, but doing the right thing by my kid, in saying that too, keeping these guys connected, these children connected, is quite hard when they're not in care together. So my kids have nothing to do with the care system, so no one speaks to my kids and asks, when would you like to see your brother? How's it going seeing your brother? Do you actually like the visits? There's nothing, so more conversations with these little people and just checking in on them, would be great. I guess I have a huge list of things, that could be different and better, but for me as a mum that had kids in care, I just want to remind people that we're not just what the information says about us. We are human beings that made a mistake, that, our punishment is our children removed, and for me, I never stopped loving them just because they went to care. I've always loved my little people, and that never changed. And hearing the stories from the young people today, letting these kids know it's not their fault. They're not coming from a caseworker, not coming from a psychologist. Let the birth family tell them that. I've just done up a beautiful storybook for my son to let him know that it wasn't his fault that I loved him, and I'm waiting to give that to him, But the meaningful stuff, bring the family involved and, grandparents and everybody, make that space. And by doing that stuff and helping the parents when they're struggling, people look at, if we help the parents, that's not putting the kids first. Well, what it is. If you can help build the parents up to the best they can be, then they can support their pet kids as best as they can. So helping family is supporting these young people in care. I don't know how much time I've got left saying this stuff, and I could speak about it all day. We started an organisation for this purpose, so we can support children first, and we can support parents. Help build them up, help be the best version that they can be, so they can be the best version parents, possible. And just listen to these little people.
And Felicity, do you know of other organisations like yours around the country?
Yeah, so similar organisations to ours, they're called Fin Networks, Fin WA, Fin Queensland, Fin Townsville, Fin Tasmania. Not sure if we've got one in New South Wales, but in saying that, in New South Wales itself, there's nothing like this out there. There's nothing to support parents. So, we've started this stuff up. We support parents in the children's court at the moment while they go through child protection, when they're afraid and their kids are removed and they don't know what's going on. I get a chance to go in there and just hang out with the parents, let them know that, I'm here to listen to you, and we've got a phone line going for now, for parents to ring, and this stuff isn't just about why kids are in care. I look at after restoration, I had little girls that went to care at 5 and 6 years old, and they're 15 and 16 years old, and you know, I don't have the biggest clue how to raise teenagers, you know, and also then to put trauma on top of that and the child protection system, it's really difficult, you know. So support aftercare, and not just for that 1 year that we're given, you know, ongoing support. You know, my mum still has trauma today because of her care experience, but you know, no one opens the door to her and say, hey, I'm here to help you, you know. So that ongoing support and that ongoing connection, and you know, some caseworkers have got it to a T. You know, I couldn't think a couple of my caseworkers enough. You know, I had a lady in my house 10 hours a day supervising me and my daughter for her to come home, you know, over a long restoration, and this woman would treat me like a human being. She'd treat my family like we're human. She'd eat our food. She'd come on her birthday and we gave her a birthday cake, and you know, she was just there for everything and just really supportive, you know, just that, you know, Felicity, you can do this better. I know you can. And, you know, just that encouragement, you know, and I guess a mother, even just a person, you know, we need them praises, we need them encouragement, we need someone just to listen. And, you know, and that's the same as our children. You know, they're no different. They're human. They need to be heard. They need to know that things are going to be okay, or things might be tough at the moment. And, you know, but definitely, you know, embedding that stuff, your parents still love you, your family love you. You know, that doesn't just go.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I've got questions coming through from our audience thick and fast, but I might just move to Jacinta for your, to get you in the game here, Jacinta. So I'm sure, I've no doubt that you've had some challenging times as a carer. What are some of the things that you've learned about supporting young people through difficult times that you could share with us?
Thank you, Jane, and thank you for Felicity for your words. Oh, excuse me. Oh dear, it's listening to Felicity is this whole thing about keeping the children in touch with their parents. I'm sorry, I'm getting so emotional. But
do you want me to go to another question?
Yeah, come back to someone.
Yeah, okay. Wow, you're right. It's incredibly powerful stuff. So, Jill, I might go to you if you don't. There's a question that's come through from one of our caseworkers, that caseworkers have so much to do each day just to meet the requirements of the role. What can they do? Do you have any advice for them about what they can do to make sure that children come first for them every day?
Look, I think it's a mindset. It's where your heart and your head is, to be honest. I don't think there's a sort of recipe that I can give people that will mean that that's going to happen. My experience is that you have to have the courage to ask kids, then to listen to what kids say back, to watch, because some kids can't talk and you need to watch to see what it is they're telling you, and then to act on what it is that they're telling you. And I think as an individual, we can all do that. We listen to our colleagues, we listen to the powers that be. So I think we can also listen to children. I, however, do want to acknowledge that the context in which we're working really influences how much of that we can do. And I think that I guess if I think about my own journey through starting as a family therapist, working with individual families that had a range of problems, serious problems, and ending up really, in a sense, coordinating government programs and being a commissioner. I did that because it became clear to me that the environment in which I was working impacted on my ability to do what I needed to do for the children and families. And just as Felicity's talked about the impact of her history and her environment on her capacity to parent, and that changing that environment then enables her to be a parent, a full-time parent to her, carer, have the children in her care. It was the same for me. I thought we need to change our systems. we've got to change our funding arrangements. The law needs changing. It's a stupid law. The regulation just gets in the way of me being able to do what I need to do, which is to, you know, ask, listen, watch and act. I didn't have the skills, so training systems need to be looked at. Where was the knowledge? And so in a sense, I expanded out in an attempt to try and change the environment in which individual practitioners operate, so that individual practitioners can do what it is that we really want them to do, which is to work with children, families and communities to help them overcome some of the barriers that they experience. I think when I look back, I think there is a difference, and we have made things, we have enabled caseworkers to do much more. But, you know, funding, worker-client ratios, all of those things impact on your ability. I still maintain you can always ask, you can always listen, you can always watch, and you can always do something. I really want to emphasise the act bit, because often people talk about listening to children. Well, I can do that, but you've actually got to do something with what they tell you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Jill. Jacinta, are you okay to talk about some of the things that you've learned?
I'm good, thank you.
Supporting young people.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I think one of the most challenging things we faced as a family was when Mum had an additional child, and the children were very confused about why they couldn't go. Well, first of all, was the baby coming to live with us, and then the answer was no, the baby was staying with Mum. And then the questions are, and from one's listening to Jillian, you know, some of them can't speak, but you could see the cogs going around, well, why is that baby staying and why can't I live? And that was something we worked through, because our sibling group of kids are such a wide variety of ages and developmentally, emotionally, at different stages. So it was difficult to find the right words and encouragement and comfort, and while maintaining you know, a positive outlook on a situation, which personally I thought, wow, that's another new one. But, you know, just when you think everything's swimming along nicely, some life throws you, you know, some curly ones. But yeah, it's right from everybody on the panel has said before. It's listening to the children and hearing them and acting on that as best you can, because we can't fix everything as much as we love to. And being mums and carers, we want to fix everything for our kids in order to keep them safe. But I think knowing we have a responsibility to look after these kids and to do our best for them until they go back to their birth families, or until we churn them out at 21 or 25 or 30, or they never leave, we turn out happy and balanced and resilient young people. But yeah, some of the days are quite challenging, and yeah, we just have to be mindful that we are putting these children first, and it doesn't matter about the sort of day we're having. We've got to do our best. It's our job. I don't tell my kids that they're my job. That wouldn't be appropriate. I tell them my job is mum, not carer or foster carer. I'm their mum. Yeah, it doesn't matter what sort of day we're having. Our first and main priority is for the children, to get them through the day, and then get them through the week, and then get them through the month. And, you know, and here we are 12 years later, practically, still doing what we do.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answered the question, Jane, but I rambled along anyway.
It did, thank you. We might move to a more systemic view. Vince, thrown to you, if you could change one thing, and this has come from the audience, if you could change one thing about the way the care system works for Aboriginal children, what would you do?
When it comes to, I suppose, the identification process, when there's a decision to be made to remove the young Jarjums from their family, that there be more family involved, more family, not Because I do believe that, for example, I think Garni Pam was telling us in a culture meeting that the government was moving in Western Australia to talk to not just the intermediate or paternal or maternal family members or parents. They can speak to anyone that is extended link to a family member to have the child removed. You know, that opens up a whole lot of danger in the sense that if there's family disputes going on with extended family and the department or the government approaches that family member and they've got it in, you know, there's our young Jarjum gone, just like that. I think for me, for what I observed and have been a part of, yeah, definitely having for more family member and discussions around that before a decision is made. And, you know, the way the decision is made and who makes that decision for that young person to remove, yeah, totally. I'd like to see that change, definitely. I believe a lot of my brothers and sisters out there in their roles would too.
That's within our control, right, Vince? So if you were giving advice to a new caseworker at LWB, what would be the most critical piece of advice you could give them? Beyond that, that might be it.
Okay, so this would be it. Don't be scared to ask questions. If you're going to questions, you know, open for education and awareness. And I would say that to a caseworker. If there's anything culturally that may be not a culture, or let me rephrase it, if it may be cultural or having anything to do or in relation to cultural, ask the questions. Because the worst thing is not asking a question and going ahead and doing the action or making that, you know, movement. And what I find in my role is that a lot of people start with the questions, with the statements. I hope you don't find this offensive, but, you know, just ask the question. That would be my advice to the caseworker. Because once you start going down that line, down that road, you know, for me, it just puts me on a different path as a culture. Just ask the questions. That's it.
That's great. Felicity, I might ask you the same question. What's the single most important piece of advice you'd give to a new caseworker?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on about the system first. You know, my idea would be to shut it down, get everyone in charge out and redo that stuff, you know. And, you know, we're meant to have early intervention first. And, you know, my kid was taken at 6 years old, but reports from 1. Like, I don't know where the early intervention that is, you know, so definitely get in there quick, support the family, you know, try and support them instead of removal, you know, and you know, it might be common sense to workers saying this is our policy, but actually do it, you know. And, you know, my idea for caseworkers is, you know, you're going to have to work with us parents and you're going to have to bear with us, you know. Some of us are, you know, are weak into this stuff where our kids are removed and, you know, our hearts are broken and it feels like our kids have died, you know, we're grieving. You know, remember we are human. If we swear a bit or we seem angry, it's not, you can't work with us. It's just we're having emotions because we're human, you know, understanding that stuff, you know, and this is where you're going to get connected with the children. If you connect the parent, the foster carer and the children, there's going to be a great relationship. But if you want to keep everyone separate, it's going to be really, really tough for everybody, you know. And I just want to say, you know, to Jacinta, you know, you do amazing work, you know. You know, I am truly grateful that my kids were cared for, and I'm truly grateful the system removed my kids. You know, I got to grow up and learn and be a parent, but I am not grateful in the way they were removed and how they were removed, you know. But you know, I really, really am grateful that the carers are there, and you guys do a tough job, you know. But the caseworkers definitely, like Vince said, be honest. If you're going to have a conversation with me, just say it. You know, I don't want to sit there for half an hour while you beat around the bush. You know, if there's something I'm not doing, tell me, because sometimes I'm not aware of this stuff like any other human being until someone lets me know. I can't change that stuff, you know. So if you got something to say to the parents, you need to say it. And remember, when we react, we are humans too, and we have emotions, and we're going to use them emotions, but don't use them against us.
Thank you. That's a great comprehensive answer. Jacinta, questions come through for you around how important is it for children to have strong connections back to their family? And what can carers do to help keep those connections strong?
Absolutely, totally, 100% important. For sure, it's our children are a completely different culture to us too, and we maintain as much cultural involvement as we are able to. We support and facilitate some family contact now, but we have to keep these children connected to their family. It would be crikey, it's so easy for kids who aren't in foster care to stay connected to their own families. Sometimes it's even more important for families to stay together as much as possible. And we know that teenagers, in fact, I'm with you, Felicity, I'm learning still about raising teenagers. And, you know, some of our teenagers don't want to have much to do at the moment with mum and dad. They don't want to have much to do with the mum and dad they live with, let alone the other mum and dad. But we have to facilitate that and make sure that the avenues are open for when they do want to be involved, that they want to be involved as much and as frequently as possible. It's funny during this time that we've had over the last few months, it's actually trying to think outside the box with the teenagers as well. As much as they love being in front of a screen, they don't particularly want to be in front of a screen with mum and dad at this time. But we can't do some face-to-face contacts. So we have to think of different ways and be a bit more open to alternatives of keeping in touch with mum and dad. And for the younger ones, it's hard. They just want to, you know, they'd love to speak to mum and dad on the phone or, you know, through Zoom. They love, you know, they Zoom. But again, I think it's going back to individuals. We aren't just dealing with kids in foster care. We are dealing with individual human beings, and for every individual human being, they're all going to have a different attitude to everything, be it having contact with family, extended family. Some of them might not want to know cousins and uncles, and some will be really, really keen to know. And we're encouraging that at the moment with our guys, you know, find out as much as you can about your cousins and your uncles and your aunts. And so it's highly important. Yeah.
Jane, can I just come in and follow up with just on those 2 points that Jacinta and Felicity have made? I think as someone who works in the system, and all of us do work within the system, it's the capacity to hold multiple and often differing and conflicting narratives in your head at the same time and in your heart at the same time. So you've got to be able to hold Felicity's perspective as a mother and an angry, hurt person at the time that children are removed. You've got to be able to hold Jacinta's experience as a foster mum and what that's like for her, having children come to her care feeling confused and uncertain. You've got to be able to hold Vince's point of view about the cultural issues, and that the community, Aboriginal community, of course want their kids raised on country, and of course want really strong connection to country. You've also got to hold the point of view of the legal system and the legal requirements. You've also got to hold the point of view of the child, who themselves have conflicting points of view. So I think really one of the skills we all need to have as players in this system, but certainly as caseworkers in this system, is the capacity to hold and acknowledge and to hear and work with multiple narratives so that nobody feels like their point of view isn't acknowledged. It may not be that they get their way. It may be that the child still is removed, but the way in which they're removed takes account of what the mum and the dad are saying or the culture is saying. So I think that's a really big point that I wanted to make, that it's that capacity to hold multiple narratives while still at the end having our kids, because all of us want the best for that child. So we, you know, which to me is about putting children first in a sense. The other thing is that I think we've got to be able to live with and work with uncertainty and lack of full knowledge and information. And that can be really difficult, as we've found with coronavirus. We don't know what's going to happen with coming out of lockdown, in a sense. We don't know what's going to happen, and it's uncertain and it's risky, and we're all feeling a little tense and so on. So the capacity to live with that sort of uncertainty, with that lack of knowledge, and at the same time holding all these multiple narratives in your head is, I think, the skill that's required in working with children and families.
And can I just, sorry, Jane, can I just add, with that connection with all these people to children, at the end of the day, this is going to give this child so much support, you know, especially children going through the system, coming into teens. They're going to have siblings, they're going to have the parents, grandparents, they're going to have caseworkers, carers. You know, my daughter's got about 12 different carers that she had. That's all connection for her. You know, we've got them on Facebook cheering her on, or they come and help me out if I'm struggling. You know, this is all about building the best support network for the child, or for my child that's in care, you know. So I think people need to remember that, and parents need and family need to be a part of that support. We can offer a lot.
And I think Jill definitely agrees with you, Felicity, and so do I. As you and Jacinta were talking, what just struck me is how much in common you have, and how much purpose there would be in, you know, that opening up that communication between the carers and the parents so much more strongly. Thank you. Rob, question. I'll just throw to you the questions that I've asked around about the system. If you could change something about the system, what would that be? And what advice would you give to a new caseworker?
I'll weave this together just as we sort of track towards end of time. So 6 words, and I'll just talk a bit about each of them. So walk, change, ask, lead, never give up, and network. More than 6 words, but anyway, 6 themes. So the walk part, I would say, if I could change anything in the system, that I would have ministers, directors, generals, leads of agencies and executives go and walk a day in the carer or a parent's shoes. Sit in a person's house. You do it for 24 hours in a carer's house, or a parent who's got 3 kids under 5, and you will soon have a change of perception about policy direction. So I think that's a really critical area. Ask, I think what Vince said was absolutely spot on. If you walk with humbleness in your discussions with people and you ask questions, most people will accept that sometimes you might say something that is a bit insensitive, but just do it humbly. So I remember when I first started as a brand new child safety officer or family services officer in those days, and one of the first people I spoke to was Auntie Ruth Haggerty in Queensland. And I went to her house and I knocked on the door and I said, "Oh, is Ruth there?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm Ruth, come in." And I sat down with her and I said, "Look, I just want to let you know, if I say anything insensitive or anything that's inappropriate, just please let me know, but it won't be because I'm doing it by anything wrong. It's just that, you know, I may not be aware." And she said, "Well, I'll stop you right there. You know, calling me Ruth is really insensitive. And from now on, you can call me Mrs. Haggerty or Auntie Ruth." And she was a lovely tutor in my very early days in the early 90s. And so I think, but if I'd not asked her, I did ask her one day, if I hadn't have said that, what would you do? And she said, "I wouldn't have said anything. We'd have just kept going along." So asking was really important. Then the third thing is about leading. So I love the work of Benjamin Zander. Benjamin Zander is a conductor in an orchestra, and he talks about the fact that the conductor of the orchestra is the only person who doesn't make a sound. They're there and they rely on their power for the ability for everyone in the orchestra to play their instruments the best they can. So if we want the orchestra to be in harmony, everyone has to play their instruments the best they can. No one person can be responsible for it, and we all have to have that responsibility about doing our best in our own little patch. The third thing is never give up. So the fifth thing is never give up. So there are some days across my career and across everybody's career as parents or as carers where we think, "Oh, I can't do this anymore." But now more than ever, we need people to be there for the long fight and to say, this is really important work, and we have to we have to drive this. And no matter what we do, our days, won't be as hard as someone else's days. It won't be as hard as a child's day. It won't be as hard as a carer's day or a parent's day. So those days when we feel like giving up, we just need to be in there. And then the final one is good networks, building links and connections. This is a great representation today of lots of people with lots of clever ideas. Bring them all together, put them in the same place, and inevitably children's lives will be improved. So that'll be my top few.
Thank you. That's fabulous. I think we're probably drawing to a close. Does anyone have anything that they wanted to say that they haven't had an opportunity to put out there yet? I might go to you, Vince.
Yeah, I've just had a question about the framework that our youth workers and we all work with within the industry, the care framework, and I had a question about how is there a cultural connection in that relation with the care framework. Recently, we've had meetings within LWB that of creating cultural care cards. So that is in the process of happening now. And as a youth worker, as an Indigenous youth worker, when I first started the care framework, I didn't see it. I didn't see it to be a success. I thought, you know what, they've missed the cultures, they've missed the traditions. But as I implemented it and worked to the care framework and then started to, put my cultural perspective into the framework, I did observe and see changes and barriers of young people slowly break down because they were, when I saw it with non-Indigenous youth workers in the industry with children, once they started to slowly understand and apply their knowledge, what they've gotten culturally, the Indigenous young people were like, wow, this non-Indigenous person knows what I'm going on about, what I'm going through in a cultural sense, and they're not Aboriginal or Torres Strait Island. So making sure, like Rob said, we ask, get the questions out there, and that can be for caseworkers and every staff member within our industry. Because at the end of the day, like we all talk about, it's our children first. And one of the thoughts that I'd like to leave you with from a cultural perspective is that I heard a young person say to me look, Vinny, being Aboriginal is not a privilege. Being Aboriginal is a lifetime, I should say. So, for a young person about 13 saying that to me, it's like, yeah, I know the field that I want to get into because I've heard your voice and that's where I want to work.
Thank you. That's really powerful. Felicity, is there anything you'd like to say as a final message to us?
Yeah, I guess there's two things, my daughter was in care for 5 years with the same carer, and the beautiful thing is that we're all still connected today. I remember working at the courthouse the other day and I came home and here's the male foster carer kicking back on my lounge like he was just part of the family, and that's how we operate in our family, that they're just part of, Mother's Day, my daughter will celebrate with them as well, Father's Day, all that stuff, we're just still connected, and it really shows that parents and carers can connect if given the opportunity, and I guess the last thing about, workplaces and stuff, I guess for me, agencies need to start getting some parent advocates. Get some parent advocates into your service. Get us connecting with your parents, My grand idea is that when you go to remove a parent, that there'd be someone like me that could come along and support that parent after you guys remove the children, because that's the most dangerous part for parents. As soon as them kids are gone, you're in so much hurt, so, connecting peer advocates, leaders, whatever you want to call them, throw us in the mix of stuff, let us help you guys work with your cases, and, that stuff does work, it is said, like sharing that stuff with each other, you learn from people who've gone through the same stuff, we can't learn from your caseworkers that haven't, we can learn from the caseworkers that have, so putting more people in there, getting involved with family and children, so I guess that's just a new way to work, and it's very different and it's very scary, and, you don't see it in Australia, but if you look elsewhere, like America and different places, you know, that stuff is happening. You know, we have a worker that got a Churchill Fellowship as well, and, you know, and travelled and looked at that stuff, how to be more family inclusive, and, you know, that stuff works. You know, we just got to try it. We've got to try something different, you know, and like I said, I'll leave it on this, you know, my son, again, you know, he is in his 9th year in foster care, taken at 11 months old, you know, and there's not a day that I've stopped loving that kid, you know. I'm human, and I love my kids too, no matter the mistakes that I've made.
Thanks, Felicity. Thank you for sharing that with us. And as you were talking, I did think I felt a Churchill Fellowship coming on for you around some of that. So maybe that's something in your future. Thank you. Jacinta, last word from you.
Just that my hope for the future is that we're all redundant, that we will have better early intervention programs that work. So we're maybe in, you know, 10 years, 15, 20 years, we're not sitting here talking about this, because children aren't going to be removed from their families, because the families will get all the supports that they need in order to stay together in the first place. And that is, it might be pie in the sky, but so I don't care. That's what I'd love to have happen in my lifetime.
Thank you. What do you think, Jill?
I think it's a fantastic aim. I've always seen my work really to do myself out of a role as a child protection worker or a family therapist or a policy person or whatever. The aim really should be to make ourselves redundant. So I think it's a really good comment that you make, Jacinta. I think in the meantime, because I know how hard it is to try and make that shift from intervening at the, you know, and removing kids and to get the dollars to try and shift and to move into supporting families so that we don't have to remove in the first place. I think that I guess I just feel like Life Without Barriers' purpose, which is to partner with people to change lives for the better, is something that I hold dear. And the values that underpin that, I think, are really important values. And I'm actually very proud to be part of an organisation that does, in a sense, put children first. And I think really we need to keep on doing that. We need to keep on being true to our purpose. We need to keep on enacting our values. And most importantly, in doing that, we need to put our children first. Not to forget the other voices, work with the other voices in all of us putting our children first.
Thank you. I think we might leave it there. Just in wrapping up, I feel like that's been a really intense, fabulous conversation. I wish we could do it every week. I wish I could get Felicity and Jacinta together for 2 hours just to talk about, you know, how we can do it so much better. I think the only thing I'd just say in wrapping up is I've heard a lot talked about in LWB in recent months about the hour of service. And when I've kind of asked, what do we mean when we talk about the hour of service? It's that every hour of service that we bring to Life Without Barriers is an opportunity to partner with people to change their lives for the better. So, and I remember when I was a young team leader, the first time I was ever a boss of anyone in child protection. And back then, the team of young women that I led, we used to come together every morning and ask ourselves, what can we do to improve the lives of the kids that we're working with today? And, you know, that was 30 years ago. But actually, I think we stumbled across something magical back then that I've carried forward, and that has really come through in this conversation today and really inspired me greatly around improving the lives of the children that we support through this collaborative approach that's been demonstrated today. So thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thank you to the people behind the scenes. And that's event number 1 down. I think there's 8 to go. Oh, hang on, I need to give a plug. Hang on, give me one. I need to plug the other events, which let me do. So we have a number of other events coming up during the week, and there's still time to book in. We've got the topics are the importance of country, a focus on children and young people from diverse backgrounds that I think our NIST team are hosting, keeping and building family connections, Mockingbird family, supporting children and young people with harmful sexual behaviour, keeping kids safe online, supporting children with a disability as they leave out-of-home care, and the importance and role of advocates and how this works in our YAP program, which is our Youth Advocacy Program. There's still time to register, so please book in. Thank you again, everyone. I feel like a talk show host signing off. It's been a pleasure, and I'll see you all soon.